Welcome, everybody, to the webinar for Quantum Cybersecurity Applied to Satellites. I am Tom Stengel, and I work for ID Quantique, and I am the Director of QRNG products at ID Quantique. Today, let me just remind you, we are going to have some questions. We're going to cover all of them at the end, but anytime during the presentation, you can click on the Q&A button on your screen and enter the questions so they're queued up and ready for us when we get to the end of the initial part of the presentation. Reminder that what we're going to cover, we're going to go over the quantum technologies and their impact on cybersecurity. And then more specifically, we're going to go into quantum technologies and how we're going to improve protection for cybersecurity, specifically starting with the keys. We're going to talk about the benefits of quantum enhanced security, in particular for space. And we're going to show you some other use cases to give you an idea of where it's already penetrating out there in the world and how easy it is to use quantum enhanced cybersecurity. I'd like to also remind you, quantum mechanics is used in a lot of products today. You'll hear a lot about quantum computing, and they get most of the press out there, rightfully so, I guess. But you'll hear of other products, quantum sensing products, and today we're going to be talking about quantum security, using quantum mechanics processes for quantum security. In particular, there's a lot of layers of security, as you know, authentication and firewalls and passwords. We're going to focus on improving encryption, and encryption is cryptography, and it's manufacturing keys and it's distributing keys. We're going to focus on making the best possible keys, improving the old-fashioned way of making keys is what we're going to focus on today. There's a lot of cybersecurity threats out there. You all know them well. We all get trained by our companies on them. Many of them have to do with making better passwords on our laptops, authentication, improving authentication, better firewalls. There's many, many different layers of security. Encryption is one of the important layers of having good cybersecurity. And, the problem's only going to get worse because of the rise of computing power. Many of those attacks are generated algorithms running on computers, and computing power, which has been growing exponentially for years, is about to really grow exponentially with the rise of quantum computers. In fact, in 2019, Google, along with NASA, made an announcement on quantum computing. And it's a pretty good thing they did it. It was the first measurable big jump in improvement of an algorithm running on a quantum computer. And I like to point out a few things. That the first significant measurable work done on quantum computing, and by measurable, I mean, they took an algorithm that they called the 1,000-year algorithm, and they ran it in 3 minutes and 20 seconds. And it had to do with random number generation, which is the foundation for cybersecurity. The very first thing they did of significance on a quantum computer was about the foundation of cybersecurity. And of course, Google and NASA and IBM, as you see here, undoubtedly were doing it for good purposes, but there's plenty of people who are using these advances in computing power not for good purposes. The other interesting thing I like to point out is around the same time, within a few weeks, IBM made an announcement saying that they had done the same thing on a regular computer, not a quantum computer. Now, it took 2.5 days, but for the sake of our conversation, which is encryption of files that will sit there not for days or months, but maybe for years, the fact that this foundation of security is something IBM's doing with existing computers in 2.5 days is something to be aware of, because there's a timeline, a time window that you have to upgrade your encryption. There's a time window that you have to implement things. It's too late. If you fly a satellite at the end of the year 2024, and in the year 2025, the encryption or the key generation on that satellite is broken, becomes obsolete, you are stuck. Now, historically, there's some things people have done, software upgrades and things like that, but some of the future proofing of encryption does require hardware, and some of that hardware you want to be looking at flying, you want to be planning now on putting to your satellites, because there is a window of time over which everybody, along the bottom here, you look at different people, no matter since Google declared quantum supremacy, different people have a view of window. That red window is, some people think that the worst view is that RSA 2048 will be broken by the end of 2024, early 2025. And other people think it might be as late as 2030 or even a little after 2030. But it's clear everybody agrees it's going to be broken. It's a matter of when. And if you're going to put a satellite up, you have to be aware that whether it is in late 2024 or whether it is on, some people like to say April 20th of 2030, is a quantum clock is ticking out there. Some people say that's the worst case. Somewhere in that window of time, it's going to fail. And then anything you've flown up in space is going to have a problem. So we're talking today about things you could do now in satellites before you fly them now that are already available to help future-proof you against these attacks. So let's talk a little bit about specifically how the current technology can help an existing product. And first, we've got to start with, well, what is the basis of cryptography? And a lot of this goes back to August Kirchhoff, who 130 years ago was doing work for military encryption. And he came up with some basic principles that we are still using here more than 100 years later. And the first one is these keys go out in public, so you have to make them so they can't be broken. And then the second one is the keys that they made truly random. They have to be unique. Well, what does that mean, and why do we care? Well, there's a good way to conceptualize what you mean by using random numbers to make a truly unique key. On the left-hand key, it's a key. Yeah, it looks like it's a key for a 200-year-old mechanical lock, which is actually what it is. And what we all know is that key is essentially useless. You could open up that lock with pretty much anything, a screwdriver, a bobby pin, or anything could open that lock because it's got a flat surface and it's easy to do. Whereas on the right, the key has some randomness to what it is, and that key is much better compared to that. You wouldn't be able to use a simple screwdriver to open that lock. So that's the idea, the concept behind randomness making for a better key. But of course, in the digital world, it's much more random, much more complicated, because we have to be able to withstand attacks from modern high-end supercomputers running very advanced algorithms. But conceptually, that's exactly what we're doing. We're using random numbers to make a key difficult to pick the lock, and we're now trying to use much more random numbers to make it impossible to pick the lock, at least from the key. Of course, there's other attacks. We aren't giving up. Random numbers are the foundation of encryption, and the random numbers make for the best possible key. And having the best possible key, the highest trusted key, is making for the highest trusted encryption. We still need to improve the algorithms. We still need to improve authentication. We still need to improve every aspect of cybersecurity, firewalls, passwords. But this is about improving the key to the best possible key available. I have been selling random number generators for 25 years. And a long time ago, pseudo-random number generator was perfectly adequate. That's why I labeled the randomness good here. It's lasted for decades. For decades, it has withstood the time. But with the rise of computing power that can run these algorithms, not in 1,000 years, which is what it would have taken in 1990, but now running it in days, this is now makes it for very weak keys. And of course, over the years, we generated QRNGs, various kinds of QRNGs. And again, they're good. I have to call them good because so far they have withstood the test of time. But again, as the attacks have improved in terms of algorithms, and as the computer that can run those attacks have improved, they are not provably random. They're certainly highly randomized, and they have lasted for a long time, but they're not provably random, and they're like a QRNG is. So let's talk about that. Quantum random number generators have been around since 2001. When ID Quantique made the first quantum random number generator in 2001, it was a large device, physically large, very expensive, a lot of power consumption, but it worked, and it worked very well. Over the decades, as we've broken into more and more applications, it shrank to boards, then it shrank to USB devices. Now, starting in 2019, it shrank down to semiconductor level. And what that means is, in terms of your ability to use it, is now it's very low production costs, small footprint, ruggedness. It's already passes tests for like automobiles, where they have high shock and vibration, the radiation requirements of space, very ruggedness, low power consumption, of course, compliant to the standards that people care about. In particular, we want to talk about NIST. We are compliant to things all over the world, but the most commonly referred to standards are from NIST. So how do we do that? Well, let's start again with the fact that encryption is a lock and a key. You are locking up data, which is great. You want it protected, but eventually you still need to use the key to open it up. Either you or somebody that you have assigned as a person who has a right to look at that data has to be able to unlock the data. And so you need to make sure that key you made is the strongest possible key. And that's where the randomness comes about. So how we do that is we use the quantum mechanical process where light is random. Goes back, Niels Bohr did a lot of the original work on quantum mechanics. And there's other people who did a lot of work on that. Heisenberg with the uncertainty principle, and Thomas Born, and even Albert Einstein worked in this space. And they proved categorically that when photons are created, they're random. So what we are doing in these products is a photon is created. It actually, the device is so small, it actually travels at an extremely small distance, but it technically travels a very small distance, and it hits a sensor array. And where it hits a sensor array is pure randomness. So that's how we are collecting the quantum entropy, pure randomness. Of course, we have to filter out some environmental conditions, make sure that they don't leak into the process, which is very easy to do in the semiconductor level. And there's always health status and self-check and all those things that are built into the device. But fundamentally, we're harvesting the quantum entropy, which you can take in its pure raw form. There's also hash-based DRVG post-processing built in. So you can take the raw quantum entropy, or you can run it through the NIST 800-90 certified post-processing and take out that random number data, as it were. So this is the guts of how the device works inside. How can you use it? Well, there's an interesting thing. All encryption today essentially works the same, whether it's an Internet of Things device and a smartphone, or a big data center, or networking equipment, or a satellite in space. They all look the same. You have a CPU, an encryption engine, memory, I/O. There's a random number generator in the system. And of course, in a data center, that CPU could be a blade, 14 inches long and 6 inches tall and 2 inches wide. The encryption engine could be a blade, 14 inches long and 6 inches tall and 2 inches wide. In a cell phone or an IoT device, it might be a system on a chip, a little device, small, everything on one chip. And anywhere in between. In a satellite, it might be an FPGA, and that field programmable gate array has the CPU and memory and the encryption built into it. So but they all architecturally look exactly the same, these 6 blocks. And how it works is the CPU sends a message to the encryption engine, and it says, hey, encrypt this file that's in memory, or encrypt this string of files that are in memory. And the encryption engine says, yep, okay. And the first thing the encryption engine does is it grabs a random number from the random number generator, because it's got to make a new key. And then it does the encryption. It runs whichever algorithm you are running today, whether it's RSA or AES or some next generation post-quantum cryptography algorithm, the Kyber crystals or something like that. And when it creates the new key using the random number, and it runs the encryption, and it hands back to the CPU message that says, here's your keys. I encrypted the file, it's in memory. There's a private key stuffed in key store. Here's your public key, and we're done. Now, how does it work with the IDQ chip? With the IDQ chip, it sits right next to the encryption engine. Whether it's in a data center, it sits next to the encryption blade, or whether it's in a smartphone, it sits next to the SoC, or whether it's in a satellite, it sits next to the FPGA, or the processor that's in a satellite, and the process works the same. The CPU sends a message to the encryption engine, and it says, encrypt that file, or encrypt that string of files, which is a communications channel. And the encryption engine reaches out and grabs a quantum random number now, a pure entropy random source. And now it makes a quantum key, the best possible key you can make. And then it runs whatever encryption algorithm you're running today, whether it's the old RSA or an AES or a next generation post-quantum cryptography algorithm like Kyber's crystal. It does the same thing, only now it is the key to open that lock later is a quantum key. And when it's done, the encryption engine says to the CPU the same thing. Here's your key set, only they're a quantum key set now. The private key is in the key store, and here's your public key and the encrypted files in memory. So really, very easy to implement, which is why it's already in so many applications out there. That is fundamentally how it gets implemented into a system today that any of you can do pretty quickly and easily. So we talk about space, where and why. So the first thing is just general attacks against cyber attacks. It can be somebody who is trying to use the communications channel for control of the satellite, to take over the satellite. Of course, that is protected today and encrypted today. And that encryption channel is eventually going to get broken, depending upon who you're listening to. Somewhere between 2024 and 2030, that encryption channel is going to get broken. And so you're going to lose control of the satellite or the critical infrastructure of your system. Secondly, is the actual information that's being done. And anywhere that you are implementing an encryption algorithm, whether it is for the sensitive communications or the data communications, pardon me, or for the control of the satellite, if it's being encrypted, you can upgrade right now to quantum enhanced encryption. And that technology implemented into your architecture means you're using the most trusted key for the cybersecurity in your system. Now, as far as the space is concerned, in particular, we have taken the devices, these devices that generate random numbers we've been making for years, and more recently finished the development and testing and upgrade of these chips for space. In particular, of course, radiation protection. We've been making for more than 3 years devices that can handle the shock and vibration of automobiles and stuff, which turns out those same chips also can handle the shock and vibration of required to launch things into space. We did make some design changes. It was pretty trivial design changes, but we did make the necessary design changes in order to be safe against the radiation space for different mission profiles. And this is actually the European standard way of looking at things, the class 1, class 2, and class 3. It is roughly analogous to what people tend to say in the United States, which is rad tolerant, rad hard, and strategic rad hard. And really each mission profile is unique. So it is roughly like talking about geosynchronous orbits or MEO orbits or LEO, low Earth orbit. But each mission profile is different. It's very possible to have a low Earth orbit profile that needs a class 1 device or vice versa. And these are both the radiation testing as well as the radiation design requirements, as well as the individual screening and testing process that these devices go through before they fly in a satellite space. So I want to just talk a little bit about the quantum decade being real. There's a tendency when people hear quantum technology to think, yeah, that's the future. Boy, by the year 2027 or 2030, I'll be doing that. But the fact is, you need to do it now, because anything you deploy, especially up in space, once they break that encryption, it's not like you can service the satellite and bring it back down and change the hardware. It's expensive to do, whereas you could just make that hardware upgrade now before you launch the satellite. And the thing is, this is already in a lot of different applications, including high volume ones. Some people are like, well, okay, you made a few. We've made millions of units. And it's already in, there's actually already 8 phones that the device has been in. These are certainly, this is certainly the more popular product line in terms of people in the world who know about quantum enhanced phones. And, they use it in a variety of different applications. Banking, of course, they use it for banking on the phones. If you have a phone that has a chip in it, they use it for banking. They're using it for a lot of different stuff, that they want to protect. Anything you want to protect in there. You want to protect your text messages. You want to protect your whatever you want to protect that you're doing. And there's other applications too. Video surveillance is, when I worked in the industry years ago, we weren't encrypting anything. We were just sending raw data. Anybody could pick off a video and read it. But today, with the implementation of surveillance and protecting the video and what it means, and now you want to upgrade it to quantum enhanced protection. You don't want to install a camera and then when the encryption inside that camera fails, or if the key can be broken, you have to throw away the camera or go out and install a new camera. So you can upgrade now the camera and install the camera even before the rise in computing power is breaking them. Same thing with medical devices out there. one of the fun new areas is the rising number of home appliances. And people like to say to me, really, there's encryption in home appliances? But think about it. Like I have one of those vacuum cleaners that can go around on its own and not bump into the walls and vacuum up if there's sugar spilled on the floor or whatever. And there's a growing number of sensors in these, and the growing amount of information these devices in your house, like refrigerators with processors inside them and Wi-Fi connections, a coffee pot with Wi-Fi connection, so you can control when you do the coffee pot. Well, if it's got a Wi-Fi connection, that means somebody can hack it and take it over. In the case of a coffee pot, what if somebody turns it on and starts a fire with it, as an example? So there's a growing need for encryption even in home appliances. And people want to implement, as long as the price is right, people want to implement the best possible encryption. The coffee pot in your house, coffee pot in my house, I've been using that coffee pot for 5-6 years. I don't want to have to throw it away because it's got bad encryption, the next version that I get. And of course, automobiles. There's a lot of ways in which it's useful in automobiles, but number one is vehicle to anywhere communication. Your car not only communicates through the cloud for updates for the car, everything, your radio in your car, your infotainment system in the car, when your service needs to be done is being done wirelessly now. And the next generation of cars, which are following people as they walk on the streets. We all have cell phones today. Just about everybody has a cell phone. So even if they don't have the ability to talk to the cell phone, the next generation cars are tracking cell phones. So if somebody's going to step out and walk through the crosswalk, they have the ability to know and automatically implement braking before you might even see the person, or that it's foggy out or something. So they're tracking all of the wireless devices in the area, so they can tell where human beings are moving and make it part of the safety and security of a car, especially the next generation cars. And again, anything that is V2X means it's an attack surface for an attacker to attack. And so, of course, they are also implementing the best possible cybersecurity. So these are all areas that are going on. So we are talking QRNG, I like to say from smartphones to satellites. It's already out there in many places, cars, satellites, cell phones, etc. So now we're going to get to the questions. Let me pop open those questions with the time here. Looking at this, okay, certifications. The QRNG chips from ID Quantique have certifications FIPS 140-2, FIPS 140-3 is in process. It is done, but not through the paperwork process at NIST. So there's a chance that there'll be some last minute kickback, but FIPS 140-2 level 3 has been done for a while. We have common criteria for one device, and for another device, it's in process now. AES certifications. So ID Quantique has a variety of products for QRNG, and depending upon the markets that they're used in, some of those products have, let's say, AES 31 certification, which is more of a European one, some common criteria, some in FIPS. Depends a little bit upon the market that they're addressing. Looking in the here, what kind of attacks does QRNG module prevent? So the QRNG is entirely made to address attacks on the key itself. So it makes for a better key, whether you're using it with an RSA algorithm, as the questioner mentioned, or a next gen one. It's made to do a better key. Let me see as I go through the questions here. Okay, working with different processors. So yeah, I mentioned system on a chip processors. There's also, there's really smaller versions called TPMs. A TPM is really a system on a chip processor with a small processor and built-in encryption. It works pretty much the same. A TPM works similar to an SoC, works similar with an FPGA. There is some different I/O sometimes. Some people are using SPI buses, some are using I2C, some are using even PCI Express. So we do have different products with different I/O on them. But in terms of working with the different kinds of microprocessors on the low end, SoCs in the middle, or high-end processors, We have designs working at all different levels with all those different levels today, including FPGA-based encryption. You look through this list here a little bit more. More about the QRNG chips with phones. Obviously, because of the volume driven by the phones, they end up being the lowest cost of the QRNG chips that we sell. And because of the requirements of phones, those chips have are first very low power consumption because they have to allow for long battery life, as well as built-in sleep modes. So our devices are not programmable. That would be an attack surface for hackable. The only thing you can do is with the phone devices, you can put it to sleep or wake it up. You can't attack the quality of the quantumness or whatever, but you can put it to sleep because that's what cell phones do. They put every chip in a cell phone can go to sleep, and it's a requirement. And the data rate inside of a phone is much lower than inside of, let's say, a data center or whatever, because a cell phone is being used by one person. So that one person is maybe doing some banking, that one person is sending some text. The actual number of new keys required by one person in any given minute is pretty small. So the chip that was specifically made to be in cell phones doesn't have a high data requirement, and it does have a low power consumption requirement. So while it is technically, the engine looks identical, it is still like a photon being captured based quantum entropy source, but it is certainly made for being low power and low bit rate. You look at max random number generation. Well, the max, there is no, I don't know what there might be some theoretical max random number generation. Today, the chips we made are targeted for specific applications. So we are not limited to, the bit rates that we have today. We could make devices at higher bit rates, but what we do is we look at the requirement of bit rates for a particular application, and then we try to make the least expensive device for that application. So people like to look at, for fun in academia, gigabit per second random numbers, and that's great. It is wonderful to do. But in terms of actual applications, we found very few applications that need more than 20 or 40 megabits per second. So the majority of our products range between 200 kilobits per second and 40 megabits per second. We do have a few higher data rate products, much more expensive, of course, and much more likely to be used in academia. You look through the list here with, we do have, so we're running a little bit short of time. Let me look at, maybe pick one more, okay, the last test, the data rate of one chip for space is 20 megabits per second. And we already have some designs for space. And in a couple of cases, they're using multiple of our chips. Well, some of them are using multiple of our chips for triple voting, which those of you who do space designs might know what I'm talking about, triple voting. And some of them are using triple voting, plus they're using redundancy because they wanted more than 20 megabits per second. So per se, as an example, if you wanted 40 megabits per second, you can use two of our chips side by side, no problem. If you wanted 40 megabits per second with triple voting, then you would use 6 of our chips, as an example. With that, I think we're running short on time. We do have a quick poll for you that I'm going to launch here. It should only take a few seconds, so I hope you will participate in it. I just launched it. I hope you can see it, and that some of you will select some answers. I see people are starting to enter. I'll give it a few more seconds for people to load some answers before I close the poll. We're still making some replies here, which is wonderful. Okay, I'm going to say, actually, some people are still making some replies. I'll give it another few seconds. Surprisingly, people are still making replies. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds before I close the polls. That's wonderful. I appreciate all of you having entered as much as you did. Ballpark, about half of you are looking at upgrading your cybersecurity now, which is wonderful. You should consider upgrading the key generation when you do that, I hope. And I'm happy to say about 2/3 of you are using encryption today as part of your cybersecurity. As you go forward, you should hopefully take a really hard look at adding encryption to all of your cybersecurity stuff. So thank you very much for attending this webinar. Let me remind you, if you think there's anyone else that you know who might be interested in watching it, we will be loading this up, a recorded version of it, for anybody to be able to watch in the future. And it will be found on the IDQ website. And we will send you a little email notification of once it's been loaded in case you want to forward it to somebody else or watch it again yourself. Thank you all very much for your time.